Welcome back to another video from Clearinghouseservices.com. Today we're covering what refusals employers must report to the FMCSA Clearinghouse. For DOT drug and alcohol testing, employers must report a refusal to test in certain situations. In fact, most refusals to test are determined by the employer. Employers are required to report to the Clearinghouse any refusal to test as determined by the employer. Documentation of the circumstances for the refusal determination will also be required. So let's dive into some examples to show what type of refusals employers are responsible for determining and responsible to report to the Clearinghouse. This information is also available as a free download at the link in the description. So here are some examples of what a refusal to test could look like. Failure to appear at a urine collection site when directed to report. If the employee did not get to the site or spent too much time getting there, it is a refusal. Failure to remain at the urine collection site. If the collector reports that the employee left the collection site before the testing process was complete, it is a refusal. Failure to provide a urine specimen. If the employer ordered an observed collection, or if the collector required the collection to be monitored or observed, it is a refusal if the employee does not comply with the request. Fails or declines to take an additional drug test that the employer or collector has directed. If the employer or collector directs the employee to take an additional test as required or permitted by the Department of Transportation, and the employee does not, it is a refusal. Fails to cooperate with any part of the urine collection process. Some examples of failure to cooperate are when the employee refuses to empty their pockets when directed, behaves in a confrontational manner that disrupts the collection process, refuses to remove their hat, coat, gloves, coveralls, etc. when directed, or fails to wash their hands when directed. For an observed collection, failure to follow the instructions to raise and lower clothing and turn around. If the employee does not follow these instructions so that the observer can check for prosthetic or other devices that could be used to interfere with the collection process, it is a refusal. Possesses or wears a prosthetic or other device that could be used to interfere with the collection process. If the employee is found to have or to be wearing a prosthetic or other device designed to carry clean urine or a urine substitute, it is a refusal. An admission to the collector of having adulterated or substituted the specimen. If the employee, during the collection process, admits to having tampered with his or her specimen, it is a refusal. Failure to remain at the alcohol testing site. If the STT or the BAT reports that the employee left the collection site before the testing process was complete, it's a refusal. Failure to provide an adequate amount of saliva or breath. If the STT or BAT reports that the employee left the alcohol testing site before providing a required amount of saliva or breath, it is a refusal. Failure to undergo a medical examination or evaluation as the employer has directed as part of the insufficient breath procedures. If the employee does not go in for a medical evaluation or does not permit it to occur, it is a refusal. Failure to sign the certification statement at Step 2 of the ATF. If the employee does not agree to have a test accomplished by signing Step 2 of the ATF, it is a refusal. Failure to cooperate with any part of the alcohol testing process. One example of failing to cooperate is when the employee behaves in a confrontational manner that disrupts the alcohol testing process. There is one refusal type that is actually determined by an evaluating physician, but then reported to the clearinghouse by the employer, and that is failure to provide a sufficient breath specimen. If the evaluating physician finds that there is no medical reason for the employee to provide an insufficient amount of breath, it's a refusal. An evaluating physician's refusal determination for an employee's insufficient breath is final, and it's not subject to a review or alteration by the employer. In extremely rare cases where the employer determines there is not a refusal, the employer must document the decision and the sound reasoning behind it. The employer then must retain this documentation in the event of an inquiry or inspection. A DOT agency or USCG representative will ask for this documentation should the situation arise, and not having it on file will bring about adverse consequences. Remember, the employer decision on a refusal to test could potentially be overturned by the DOT, a DOT agency, or the USCG if it's deemed necessary. So, as a safeguard, to ensure that the employer makes the correct determination, the employer should consult with their MRO regarding collection site refusals, as the MRO is, after all, the gatekeeper for the drug testing process. That being said, let's take a minute to talk about MRO-determined refusals to test. There are only a few scenarios where refusals are determined by the medical review officer. It's extremely important to understand and be clear about who is truly responsible to determine a refusal to test. With the new clearinghouse requirements, employers and MROs will need to report the specific refusals that they are directly responsible for. Here are the scenarios where the MRO is responsible for determining the refusal. Adulterated or substituted urine specimen. If the laboratory reports a confirmed adulterated or substituted specimen to the MRO, and the MRO determines that there is no medical reason for the result, it's a refusal. Failure to provide a sufficient amount of urine after a 3-hour shy bladder process. If the MRO finds that there was no medical reason for the employee to provide an insufficient amount of urine, it's a refusal. Failure to undergo a medical examination or evaluation that the MRO or employer has directed. If the employee does not go in for a medical evaluation or does not permit it to occur, it's a refusal. An admission to the MRO to having adulterated or substituted the specimen. If the employee, during a medical review, admits to having tampered with his or her specimen, it's a refusal. The medical review officer's refusal determination is final, and it's not subject to a review or alteration by the employer. An evaluating physician's refusal determination for an employee is always final and not subject to employer review. For a compliant clearinghouse program, contact clearinghouseservices.com today by either visiting us online or calling us directly at 877-345-2425. If you found this video helpful in any way, please hit the like button and consider sharing the video on social media, via email, or even text message. And to stay updated and get notified of future videos, subscribe to the clearinghouseservices.com channel and hit that bell icon. Thanks for watching.